I called my son Max to discuss his upcoming wedding plans. That's when my daughter-in-law Lena stared directly at me and delivered a statement that would change everything. With an unsettling calmness, she announced, "Actually, we got married yesterday. The ceremony was private. We only included people who matter most." Those words struck me with devastating force. People who matter most. For 3 full years, I had covered their $500 monthly rent without fail. Every single item of furniture in their apartment came from my wallet. When their refrigerator sat empty, I filled it. Yet somehow, I didn't qualify as someone who mattered. There I stood in my own living room, gripping the phone as though it had become impossibly heavy. My son couldn't meet my eyes while Lena settled comfortably onto the couch I had purchased for them. In my closet hung the pale pink dress I had carefully selected for her wedding. $200 spent, along with matching shoes and dreams of being present for my only son's most significant milestone. That outfit would never see those wedding photographs, because I would never be in them. I had dedicated weeks to preparation. $1,000 sat ready as their wedding gift. My sister Diana in Chicago had already received my excited phone call sharing the news. I had scrubbed my entire house spotless, anticipating a post-ceremony celebration here. All those efforts crumbled instantly with her calculated statement, "Only people who matter most." Max eventually found his voice, delivering what sounded like a rehearsed explanation. "Mom, we kept it intimate. Extremely small. Just us and the required witnesses." I recognized the deception immediately. Social media revealed the truth I wasn't meant to discover. Lena's parents stood proudly beside the newlyweds in multiple photos. Her siblings raised champagne glasses in celebration. Lena wore an elegant white gown, financed partly by the $800 I had provided her last month for personal necessities. I witnessed everything they had attempted to hide from me. 7 days later, exactly 1 week after that crushing humiliation, Lena contacted me with a completely transformed demeanor. Gone was the self-assured woman who had deliberately excluded me. Her tone now carried desperation, almost begging. "Renate, our rent payment is late. The landlord is threatening eviction if we don't pay within days. You forgot to send the transfer." Her voice wavered as though facing catastrophe. I remained quiet momentarily, recalling countless rushed trips to the bank, ensuring that transfer went through. Remembering all the personal plans I had abandoned to guarantee their housing security. Thinking of the beans and rice I had eaten so they could enjoy their wants, not just needs. Now, after deliberately cutting me from their life's most meaningful event, they possessed the nerve to call, as if nothing had occurred. "Lena," I responded with surprising composure. "Didn't I mention that I only assist people who matter most?" The silence that followed felt endless. I could hear my own heartbeat in the void. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trembling. She was. "Renate, I don't follow," she stammered nervously. "We've always been important to you. You're practically a second mother to me." Deception. Complete deception. Wrapped in that sugary tone, she deployed exclusively when requesting something. The identical voice used when asking for wedding dress money, honeymoon funds, and ring financing. Expenses I had covered without knowing I would never witness the ceremony where those rings were exchanged. For years, I had experienced this persistent sensation of treading carefully, measuring every word, every action, every present, desperately hoping for even minimal affection from my own son. I had become the accommodating mother, the compliant mother-in-law, the quiet financial provider who never objected when treated as invisible. But that phrase, "only people who matter most," awakened something within me that had been suppressed far too long. I had mentally calculated my total spending on them across those 3 years. Combining rent, groceries, presents, emergencies, and indulgences, the figure exceeded $20,000. $20,000 extracted from my retirement fund, my savings account, from the inheritance my deceased husband had left to secure my remaining years. And what did all that achieve? Being treated like an outsider on my own son's wedding day. That evening after ending the call, I sat on my bed and wept. But these weren't tears of grief. These were tears of rage, of accumulated resentment, of years silently bearing disrespect. I cried for every instance they made me feel my love was burdensome, my presence inconvenient, my money the sole valuable thing I possessed. I cried for the knave mother I had been, for the woman who had disappeared while attempting to become essential to people who deemed her expendable. The following morning brought transformation. Beyond just betrayal's sting, something deeper and colder had emerged. I rose and faced my bathroom mirror. The same weary eyes stared back, the same lines etched by years of giving love unreturned. Yet something else appeared in that reflection. A hardness I barely recognized, a resolve buried beneath years of submission. I prepared coffee in the kitchen, maintaining my 40-year morning ritual. However, this time I didn't consider calling Max to check on his sleep. I didn't examine my phone, anticipating his apology for yesterday's humiliation. For the first time in memory, I prioritized myself. I seated myself at the table, where I had planned countless surprises for them, counted numerous bills for their expenses, and cried quietly when they showed indifference. Now this table would witness something entirely different. I retrieved my checkbook and bank statements, beginning precise calculations. I wanted exact figures documenting my own foolishness. Monthly rent at $500 across 36 months totaled $18,000. Groceries and household items averaging $200 monthly added $7,200. Birthday presents, Christmas gifts, anniversary items summed to at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies cost $800. The car loan they never repaid was $2,500. Their apartment's air conditioning repair ran $600. Living room furniture cost further $200. $33,400. That represented the precise sum of my generosity. $33,400 drained from my husband's inheritance, my pension, from savings accumulated penny by penny through decades of honest labor. All that money wasted keeping two grown adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend basic respect. The phone rang displaying Max's name. Ordinarily, my heart would have raced as I hurried to answer, hoping he would finally apologize and clarify everything as a misunderstanding. This time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then silence. I continued sipping my coffee undisturbed. 10 minutes passed before it rang again. Lena this time. I ignored it as well. Then Max sent a text. "Mom, please respond. We must talk." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I decided on a walk. I hadn't done this in months without specific purpose or errands related to them. Always the bank for transfers, the supermarket buying their necessities, the pharmacy collecting Lena's medications. Today I walked simply because I chose to. I passed the park where I had frequently brought Max as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who embraced me tightly, calling me the world's best mom. When had he transformed into this man who treated me like an ATM with emotions? When did I begin confusing love with money? When did I start believing I needed to purchase my own son's affection? At the bank where I had routinely made automatic transfers, I paused at the entrance. Branch manager, Mr. Klein, noticed me through the glass and waved. I had known him for years. He had processed every transfer to Max and Lena, watching my account deplete month after month while filling theirs. I entered and walked straight to his office. "Mr. Klein," I stated, "I need to cancel every automatic transfer I've scheduled." He looked surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as predictable as sunrise. "Are you certain, Mrs. Richter? Has something occurred?" His concern felt genuine, more genuine than any interest Max had demonstrated recently. "What occurred is that I finally see clearly," I answered. I want everything cancelled, and I also need information about protecting my accounts. No one else should have access to my money. While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone rang constantly. Max, Lena, Max again, as though they possessed radar detecting threats to their income source. I powered the phone off completely. Mrs. Richter. Mr. Klein said, handing me the paperwork. Forgive me for overstepping. But throughout these years, I've observed your tremendous generosity toward your family. I hope you're not being coerced into these changes. His words touched me profoundly. This man, who knew me only through banking transactions, displayed more genuine concern for my welfare than my own son. I'm not being coerced, Mr. Klein. Quite the opposite. I've finally stopped coercing myself. Leaving the bank, I felt remarkably light, as though I had deposited an enormous weight in that office. For the first time in years, my money belonged entirely to me. No financial obligations to people who viewed me as a resource rather than a person. I headed home thinking about everything I hadn't done to please Max and Lena. Trips I hadn't taken to save money for them. Friends I no longer saw because I remained constantly available for their emergencies. Hobbies I had abandoned because every dollar spent on myself meant $1 less for their needs. Arriving home, I discovered 3 vehicles parked outside my door. Max's, Lena's, and one unfamiliar. I detected movement inside my house through the windows. My blood chilled. They possessed keys. I had provided keys because I trusted them, believing they would someday care for me as I had cared for them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. The first real confrontation of my new life was beginning. I opened my door and encountered a scene I will never forget. Max sat on my couch, head buried in his hands. Lena paced frantically like a trapped animal. An older man I didn't recognize was examining papers on my dining table. My papers. My personal documents. What is happening here? I demanded in a voice louder than I intended. All 3 looked at me as though I were the intruder in my own home. Lena spoke first, her voice carrying that desperate urgency I had heard on the phone. Renate, thank goodness you're here. We need to discuss something important. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted regarding your situation. My situation. The question emerged with surprising calm. What situation? I'm doing perfectly well. Max finally raised his head, looking at me with eyes that once belonged to an innocent child, but now reflected only financial panic. Mom, we visited the bank and learned you cancelled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained you also blocked our account access. We can't understand why you did this. Mr. Fisher, a man in his 50s wearing a gray suit and an unconvincing smile, approached with an extended hand. Mrs. Richter, I am Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are worried about your mental health and requested that I evaluate the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked directly to my dining table and gathered all my documents he had been reviewing without authorization. These are my private papers. You have zero right to examine them without my permission. Mom. Max interrupted with that patronizing tone he had perfected recently. We're concerned about you. Your behavior has been very unusual lately. First, you cut off our finances without explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We believe you might require professional help. Lena approached, attempting to take my hand with that artificial tenderness she reserved for moments of need. Renette, dear, we know you're experiencing significant stress. Perhaps loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, episodes of confusion happen naturally. The word, confusion, rang through my mind like an alarm. Now I understood their reason for bringing the lawyer. This wasn't about helping me. This was about declaring me mentally incompetent and seizing control of my finances. The same woman who had told me they only invited people who mattered most to their wedding was now treating me like a senile elderly person. I am not confused. I stated with firmness that silenced the room. I am clearer than I have been in years. And you are going to leave my house immediately. Mr. Fisher interrupted with that professional voice attorneys employ when attempting to sound reasonable. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed. But your children have a legitimate right to intervene if they believe your capacity to make financial decisions is compromised. They have documented several troubling behaviors. Troubling behaviors. The laugh that escaped my throat sounded harsh, almost merciless. Such as what? Deciding that my money actually belongs to me. Choosing to stop funding the lives of two grown individuals who treat me with contempt. Lena leaped up as though I had struck her. We never mistreated you. Your family to us. Everything you own will eventually become ours anyway. We're simply accelerating the timeline. There it was, the raw, undisguised truth. Everything I possessed would someday belong to them. In their minds, I was already deceased, and they were merely collecting their inheritance early. Whether I had 70 years remaining, or 70 days, made no difference. To them, I was simply an ATM with legs that had become troublesome. Out, I commanded, indicating the door. All three of you leave my house now. Max rose with that petulant expression he displayed when denied. Mom, we can't simply leave. We have commitments. The rent, the vehicle payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us overnight. I can't. My voice elevated for the first time during this entire exchange. Who claims I can't? For years, I've paid rent on property, not in my name. I stocked a refrigerator in a home where I wasn't wanted. I financed a lifestyle that clearly had no space for me. Mr. Fisher retrieved a folder from his briefcase and positioned it on my table. Mrs. Richter, we've prepared documents that could simplify this transition. A power of attorney enabling Max and Lena to manage your finances more effectively. This would merely be temporary until you recover. I grabbed the folder and, without opening it, tossed it straight into the trash bin. The only transition happening here is yours toward the front door. Lena began weeping, but these weren't tears of sorrow. These were tears of frustration, of suppressed fury. You can't abandon us like this, Renate. We were depending on you. We made plans assuming your support. We purchased things. We assumed financial obligations because we knew we could rely on you. Obligations based on my finances. I responded. Not on my welfare. Not on my contentment. Not on my companionship. Solely on my finances. And now that I've decided my money serves me better in my own existence, I'm suddenly a disoriented elderly woman requiring legal supervision. Max attempted to approach me, but I stepped backward. He was no longer the child who rushed into my embrace during nightmares. He was a 35-year-old man viewing his mother as an impediment between himself and a comfortable existence financed by others. Mom, we made errors, he stated in a voice intended to sound apologetic. The wedding was a miscommunication. Lena was anxious. I was under strain. We can repair this if you just become sensible again. Sensible. The word tasted acrid in my mouth. Being sensible means continuing to finance your existence while you treat me like an outsider. It means pretending it doesn't wound me to have been excluded from the most significant day of my only son's existence. Mr. Fisher collected his papers with the efficiency of someone accustomed to rejected proposals. Mrs. Richter, this isn't finished. Your family has legal alternatives. If you're truly making irrational choices due to mental health issues, a judge can determine you require guardianship. His words felt like a physical blow. I realized this wasn't merely a manipulative family visit. This was a genuine legal threat. They intended to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. Mr. Fisher, I stated, meeting his eyes directly. I suggest you investigate thoroughly before threatening a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 4 decades. who raised her son alone following her husband's death, who maintained a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially sustained two completely capable adults. Lena ceased crying and regarded me with a coldness that finally revealed her authentic face. This won't remain like this, Renate. We have rights and attorneys too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the attorneys you desire, with your own funds, naturally, because mine are no longer available to finance your legal theatrics. The three of them proceeded to the door with the wounded dignity of people unaccustomed to being refused. Before exiting, Max turned toward me one final time. Mom, this is going to end terribly for you. You'll end up isolated with nobody to care for you when you genuinely need it. Max, I said with profound sadness, but also crystalline clarity, I am already isolated. The difference is that now it's by my own selection, not by your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, enveloped by the most beautiful silence I had experienced in years. It was the silence of liberation. That evening, I couldn't sleep, not from sorrow or remorse, but from adrenaline of having reclaimed authority over my own existence. I lay awake planning my next moves like a general preparing for combat. If Max and Lena wanted confrontation, I would provide them with warfare. But it would be warfare fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already dressed and prepared to depart. My first destination was attorney Mr. Weber's office, a man I had met years earlier when handling my husband's estate. Unlike Mr. Fisher, whom Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber possessed an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting elderly rights. Mrs. Richter, he stated as I explained the situation. What your children attempted yesterday is more common than you imagine. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal offense. The fact they entered your residence without permission and examined your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words simultaneously calmed and concerned me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't losing my mind, that what had occurred was truly abusive. They concerned me because I realized the situation was graver than I had thought. We must document everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every transfer, every present, every instance they pressured you for funds. We'll also revise your estate plan to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled upon seeing the total sum, 403 years. Mrs. Richter, with this amount, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely funded the lives of two adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. When I departed Mr. Weber's office, I possessed a comprehensive plan. First, I would replace all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a security system with cameras to protect myself from future surprise visits. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different institution where they had no connections. And fourth, I would begin living the life I had postponed for years. My next destination was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Sommer, had known me for years because I was constantly purchasing items to repair Max and Lena's apartment. This time was different. Mrs. Richter, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son, he asked with the familiarity of someone who had quietly witnessed my wasted generosity. No, Mr. Sommer. This time it's for my own residence. I need to replace all the locks, and I want them to be of premium quality. He looked surprised but asked no questions. While I was selecting the locks, his son Ethan, who installed security systems, arrived. It was Providence in action. Ethan, I told him, I also need to install surveillance cameras, the complete system. Cost is not a concern. While they were preparing everything for next day's installation, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Lena calling from someone else's phone, because I had blocked her number following yesterday's confrontation. Renate, it's Lena. Please don't disconnect. We need to talk like civilized adults. Speak, I said curtly. Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was an error. Max and I have discussed it, and we want to make amends. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We can host it at your house. Cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so transparent, I almost laughed. Lena, how much rent do you owe exactly? The silence on the other end confirmed I had struck a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Renate. We genuinely miss you in our lives. Do you miss me or my finances? I asked directly. Both, she replied with surprising honesty. Renate, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial assistance, but we care about you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said. Why wasn't I important enough to attend your wedding? Why am I not important enough to receive a call that doesn't request money? When was the last time you contacted me just to ask how I was doing? Another silence. We both knew the answer. Never. Lena, I'm only going to explain this once. For 3 years, you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You exploited me. You disregarded me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the funds are depleting, you suddenly discover you care about me. Renate. Please. I interrupted her. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to attend your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I disconnected and powered off the phone completely. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon, I visited the beauty salon I hadn't been to in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the money I had designated for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Richter! My favorite stylist Cynthia called out. What a surprise. I thought you had forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I also deserved to be pampered. I treated myself to the complete treatment. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without experiencing guilt. While Cynthia worked on my hair, she shared stories about her life, her children, her aspirations. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Max and Lena's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter, she said when finished. But more than that, you look liberated. Did something positive happen? Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no. When I arrived home that afternoon, there was an unfamiliar vehicle in front of my door. My heart raced momentarily, thinking Max and Lena might have returned with reinforcements. But as I approached closer, I saw an older woman sitting on my porch steps. Mrs. Richter, she asked as I exited the car. Yes, that's me. Can I assist you? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had an opportunity to talk. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices in your house, and I became worried. Is everything all right? Her sincere concern touched me profoundly. Here was a stranger displaying more interest in my welfare than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make you coffee, and I'll share a story you won't believe. While I prepared coffee, I recounted the entire situation. Eleanor listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, and when I finished my story, her eyes were filled with tears. Mrs. Richter, she said, you did the right thing. I experienced something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my obligation to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't provide them money. What happened? I asked. I cut off the funds when I realized they only contacted me when they needed something. At first it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, attempted to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, My daughter contacted me to genuinely apologize. Now we have an authentic relationship based on affection, not on finances. Her words provided hope and confirmed I had made the correct decision. Do you think Max and Lena will understand eventually? Perhaps yes, perhaps no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Richter. Your responsibility now is to live your own existence. That evening, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying whether Max and Lena had funds for rent, for groceries, for their desires. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The following day, Ethan and Mr. Sommer arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning to replace the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone rang constantly from unknown numbers. Lena was still attempting to reach me from different phones, but I had developed a new skill, completely ignoring calls that didn't serve me. Mrs. Richter, Ethan said as he installed the cameras, "This system will provide you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who's approaching your house, even when you're absent, and if someone enters without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't pain me as much as it used to. It was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. While they were working, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. Call my sister Diana in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we spoke, I would tell her about Max and Lena's successes, about how much I had spent on them, about how proud I was to be able to assist them. I now realized our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. "Renette," Diana answered, surprised. "Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months." "I'm well, Diana. Better than well. I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses." I recounted the entire story from the beginning. The secret wedding, the humiliation, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off the funding. Diana listened silently, and when I finished, her response surprised me. "Renate, sister, it was about time. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you boast about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how." "What did you want to tell me?" "That Max never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always my mom helped me with this, or my mom bought me that, but never I miss my mom, or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person." Her words stung, but it was a necessary pain, like when a doctor cleans an infected wound. It hurts, but it's part of healing. "You know what else I noticed?" Diana continued. "Lena always spoke about you in the future tense. When Renate is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we'll invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really live." This revelation hit me like ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and my money. While I was attempting to make them happy, they were planning their future without me. After talking with Diana, I sat in my kitchen processing all this information. Years of marriage to a man who truly loved me. 35 years of raising my son alone after my husband's death. And 3 years of financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 obstacle. The doorbell rang, and on the new cameras I saw Eleanor with a mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she handed me fresh, brewed coffee. "I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday," she said, with that sincere smile I had already come to appreciate. We sat in my living room and Eleanor shared more details from her own experience. "My daughter said the exact same thing to me that Lena says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." Those are rehearsed phrases, Mrs. Richter. They learned them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. Do you think such a handbook exists? I asked half jokingly. Not officially. But it seems everyone reads from the same book. Chapter 1, Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2, Create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3, When she resists, question her mental health. We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was both amusing and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money? I asked Eleanor. Every single day for the first 3 months. She answered honestly. But then I started seeing results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started looking for extra work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years. Visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked slightly neglected, because I hadn't been there to clean it in months. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Max. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, thinking somehow that would compensate for him growing up without a father. But I think in the process I forgot to be myself. The wind blew gently, and for a moment I felt like he was listening to me. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this, and I didn't want to see it. His wife is. Well, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live peacefully. I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I have learned. I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with new ones, and stayed there for another hour, simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I was not in a rush to get home to solve a crisis for Max and Lena. When I arrived home, there were 3 vehicles parked in front of my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed me it was Max, Lena, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking to each other and pointing at my house. I didn't exit the car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber, my attorney. Mr. Weber, they're at my house again. This time they've brought more people. What should I do? Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Richter. I'll be there immediately, and I'll call the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They're not permitted to be on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Weber and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers speak with Max and Lena, saw my son gesticulate angrily, saw Lena crying again, but this time her tears didn't move me. One of the officers approached my vehicle. Ma'am, you can exit safely. Your visitors are going to leave immediately. As I got out of the car, Max shouted at me from the street. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son. Max. I replied with a calm that surprised even me. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. Lena screamed from across the street. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this. Mr. Weber interjected. Mrs. Brooks. Any future communication must be through my office. And I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats. Because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years. I watched them drive away in their vehicles. Defeated, but not surrendering. I knew this wasn't finished. But for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional assistance. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And more importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. That evening, Eleanor invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter who was visiting, and I was able to witness with my own eyes what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully to each other, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. The daughter didn't ask for funds once the entire evening. I wanted that with Max too. I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter had left. And maybe you'll achieve it one day, she replied. But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance cameras showed me that Max and Lena were driving past my house several times daily. Sometimes slowly, sometimes they parked for a few minutes, but without exiting. It was as if they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment for their next move. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every one of these visits, so I kept a detailed log with dates and times. Their persistence will work in our favor, he had said. Every time they appear after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, I was calmly having breakfast when the doorbell rang. The camera showed me a very well-dressed young woman with a folder in her hands and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture told me this was not a social visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Renate Richter," she said as I opened the door. "I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood ran cold. Max and Lena had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private attorneys. Now they had involved the government. "Can I see your identification?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Of course." She showed me an official ID that looked genuine. "I am social worker Ms. Schmidt. Can I come in and speak with you?" I let her in, knowing that refusal would have been worse for my case. Ms. Schmidt sat down in my living room and took a form out of her folder. "Mrs. Richter, we have received reports that you have shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you have cut off communication with your family, and that you have shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you have refused medical and legal assistance from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed elderly woman. I recognized Lena's handwriting in the wording. She had always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. "Ms. Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I would like to call my attorney before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it should not be a problem to speak with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their invasions. If you're innocent, you shouldn't complain about your privacy being violated. "Ms. Schmidt, I'm calling my attorney. You can wait here or come back another day, but I will not answer any questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Weber, and he was there within 20 minutes. When he came in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Ms. Schmidt," he said after checking her ID, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Ms. Schmidt," he said after checking her ID, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir." Ms. Schmidt replied with less confidence than before. "We have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked dryly. The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation. The same family that broke into her house without permission and examined her private documents. The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money. Mr. Weber took a folder from his briefcase and positioned it on the table. Here I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 that were withdrawn from her accounts in 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If someone needs to be investigated here, it is not my client. Ms. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given didn't match the reality before her. Mrs. Richter, she said finally, can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son? Because I finally discovered they were exploiting me. I replied simply. Because I realized that to them I wasn't a mother, but a bank account. Because I was tired of funding the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle. But don't you feel it's your responsibility to assist your family? The question outraged me. Ms. Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore. Mr. Weber interjected. Ms. Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the assistance of his 71-year-old mother? Ms. Schmidt didn't answer immediately. I could see her re-evaluating the entire situation. Mrs. Richter, she asked after a moment, do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own vehicle. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medication? Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I don't have any medical conditions requiring medication. Mr. Weber added, my client has just undergone extensive medical examinations as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical condition. Ms. Schmidt closed her folder. Mrs. Richter, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case. After she left, Mr. Weber and I remained silent for a few minutes. Renate, he said finally, this is going to continue escalating. Max and Lena are spending funds they don't have to hire professionals to attempt to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they are desperate? It means exactly that. What else can they do? They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and difficult to win. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned. The thought terrified me. They could take control of my funds. They could attempt to, but we have solid evidence that you are completely competent, and that they are motivated by greed, not by genuine concern. That afternoon, I called Deanna to vent. Sister, she said after hearing my story, do you notice how far they are willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending money on attorneys and doctors, destroying their own reputation. All to get access to your bank account again. Her words made me think. Max and Lena had completely revealed their true nature. There was no going back. There was no possibility of a genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always just been funds on legs. This revelation, although painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the correct decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven themselves that my emotional and physical well-being was less important to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor came to visit with a surprise. She had invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. Renette, she introduced me. These are my friends Cynthia, who you already know from the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. We have all been through similar situations with abusive family members. We spent the evening sharing stories. Maria had had to establish boundaries with a brother who constantly asked her for funds. Carmen had severed her relationship with a daughter, who only visited when she needed money. Alfreda had had to modify her will after she discovered her grandchildren considered her their retirement plan. What hurts me most, I confessed, is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing that I never had the love I thought I had. Renette, Alfreda said with the wisdom of her 80 years, true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I had bought attention, not love. I had financed an illusion. You know what I've discovered? I said to my new friends. That loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being lonely on your own. At least now when I am alone, I am in good company. Everyone laughed, and we toasted to our newfound wisdom. That night, after my new friends had left, I sat in my garden thinking. The stars shone brighter than ever, or perhaps I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely independent financially. I had no dependents, no financial obligations to anyone but myself. And instead of scaring me, this reality excited me. I could travel when I wanted. I could remodel my house. I could buy myself nice clothes. I could donate to charities that were important to me. I could invest in my own future, instead of funding the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope. And for the first time in years, I wanted to plan my future. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought I had finally won the battle. I had settled into a beautiful routine. Calmly having breakfast and reading the newspaper, tending to my garden, having lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends. And in the afternoons, I devoted myself to activities I had given up for years. I had started painting again, something I was passionate about before I became Max and Lena's personal financier. But on a Thursday morning, while I was painting flowers on my new easel, Mr. Weber came to my house with a grim expression that made my blood run cold. Renette, we need to talk. Max and Lena have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. They are requesting to have a legal guardian assigned to you. The words fell on me like stones. I knew it was a possibility, but hearing it out loud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they can take control of my funds? If a judge determines that you are unable to manage your affairs, yes, he could appoint Max as your legal guardian, which would give him full control over your finances. I sat down heavily on my couch, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had experienced in my life. My own son was attempting to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. Mr. Weber, what evidence could they have? You yourself have witnessed that I am completely competent. They have statements from 3 witnesses who claim you have behaved erratically. They also submitted unpaid doctor's bills that you supposedly didn't pay and medications that you supposedly hoarded without taking them. But that's a lie. I don't have any outstanding doctor's bills or hoarded medications. I know, Renette, but they have fabricated convincing evidence. They also have the statement from Dr. Lyman, who states that you refuse to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had turned my refusal to undergo an unnecessary examination into proof of mental illness. They had used my instinct to protect myself from them as proof that I needed protection. Who are the 3 witnesses? Mr. Weber looked through his documents. Lena, of course. A neighbor named Mr. Davis. And someone who claims to be your pharmacist, Mr. Green. Mr. Davis was the neighbor across the street. An unpleasant man who had always had problems with me, because my friends sometimes parked in front of his house. Mr. Green was indeed my pharmacist, but I didn't understand what he could have against me. I need to speak with Mr. Green. I told Mr. Weber. Something's not right. We went to the pharmacy together that afternoon. Mr. Green received me surprised and nervous. Mrs. Richter, it's good to see you. How are you? Or Mr. Green, I was told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior with my medications. His face turned red as a tomato. Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago and asked about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. And what did you tell her? I explained to her that you only purchase vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular medical prescriptions. But she insisted that this was proof that you weren't taking adequate care of your health. Mr. Weber interjected. Mr. Green, did you sign a paper? She brought a document that said, I was confirming that Mrs. Richter had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Lena's manipulation knew no bounds. Mr. Green, I said, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no problems with medications. Of course, Mrs. Richter. I am terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. After the pharmacy, we went to confront Mr. Davis. When we knocked on his door, he received us with obvious hostility. What do you want? Or Mr. Davis. Mr. Weber said, I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. And you're right, I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you be more specific about the behaviors you observed? Installing cameras as if she lived in a war zone. Having strangers visit all the time. Yelling at her family in the street. I realized Mr. Davis had taken everything out of context. The cameras had been installed for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my house from Max and Lena's invasions. Mr. Davis, I said, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. That's what a crazy person would say. He replied cruelly. There was no way to reason with him. His statement was based on superficial observations maliciously interpreted. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat down to plan our defense. Renate, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore, who is an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm that you are completely competent. What if Max and Lena have bribed the judge? What if none of this matters, because they have already decided to declare me incompetent? Renate, the legal system is not perfect. But it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We are going to fight this. The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore. She was a woman in her 50s with kind, but astute eyes. Mrs. Richter, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours, she asked me questions about my memory, my reasoning ability, my financial understanding, my emotional health. She also gave me cognitive tests and asked me to solve mathematical and logical problems. Mrs. Richter, she said at the end, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this? Based on what you've told me, and the documents I've reviewed, this seems to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, It's more common than people think. I left the consultation feeling validated, but also sad. The professional confirmation of my mental health was a relief, but it also confirmed that the lawsuit was real and necessary. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with all our friends from the garden club. When I told them about the incompetence lawsuit, everyone was outraged. "Renate," Maria said, "we will testify in your favor. We have been with you for weeks, and anyone can see that you are thriving. Better than thriving," Cynthia added. "You are clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know." Alfreda, with her 80-year-old wisdom, took my hands. "Renate, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many of these victims didn't have: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you." Her words gave me hope. I was not alone in this fight. I had an army of strong women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. "You know what the saddest thing about all this is?" I said. "That Max and Lena are willing to destroy any future possibility of reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no going back from this. And maybe that's for the best," Cynthia replied. "At least now you know exactly who they are and you can act accordingly." That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I really cried. Not out of sadness, but out of grief. I said my final goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was reciprocated. But something new also emerged within me. An iron determination not to let myself be stripped not only of my funds, but also of my dignity and my freedom. The war had officially begun, but I was ready to fight. The trial came 3 weeks later. I woke up early, put on my best black suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, my dignity as a person, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond my bank account would be judged. Mr. Weber came at 7 in the morning to go over our strategy one last time. "Renate, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove that you are incompetent. We just have to show that you are not. And what if the judge is already biased? Judge Miller has a reputation for being fair. I researched his past cases, and he doesn't automatically favor families. He is dedicated to protecting the rights of the elderly." We arrived at the courthouse at 9 o'clock in the morning. In the hallway, I saw Max in a new suit that he probably bought for the occasion, and Lena dressed in black as if she were at a funeral. Maybe it was the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Max avoided my gaze, but Lena held my gaze with a coldness that confirmed that for her, this was just a business transaction. Their attorney was an older, elegant man with the kind of confidence that comes from winning similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, his strategy was clear: to portray me as a confused elderly woman who had been manipulated by strangers to alienate me from my loving family. "Your Honor," he said in a solemn voice, "Mrs. Renate Richter has shown a clear mental decline in recent months. She has cut off all financial support for her family without a rational explanation. She has installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia and has isolated herself from her loved ones, under the influence of neighbors and attorneys, who are obviously taking advantage of her vulnerable situation." Every word had been carefully chosen to make my self-empowerment sound like dementia, and my freedom sound like external manipulation. Then they called their witnesses. Lena was the first to testify, and her performance was Oscar-worthy. She cried as she described how I had completely changed, how I had become hostile and paranoid, how I had isolated myself from the family that loved me. "Your Honor," she said in a trembling voice, Renate has always been like a second mom to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs. Lies wrapped in convincing tears. When Mr. Webercross examined her, the cracks in her story began to become visible. Mrs. Schuster, can you tell the court, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money? Lena stammered. Well, we always talked about many things. Can you give me a specific date? I don't remember exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her that you had only invited special people? Lena's face turned red. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the right context to tell your mother-in-law that she is not a special person? She couldn't answer convincingly. Max was next. Seeing him on the witness stand, swearing to tell the truth, while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had raised alone, the one I had dedicated my entire life to. My mom has always been very generous with us, he testified. But lately, she has become erratic and irrational. We believe she is being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her. When Mr. Webercross examined him, the mask fell completely. Mr. Richter, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Does $33,400 sound about right? Maybe. She's always been generous. And how many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money? The silence was deafening. Is it true that you and your wife broke into my client's house without permission and examined her private documents? We were worried about her. Is it true that you brought an attorney to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances. Do you, at 35 years old, need the assistance of your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Max couldn't answer with dignity. Mr. Davis testified about my supposed erratic behaviors, but when Mr. Weber asked him for details, he admitted that he had never spoken to me directly, and that all his information was based on superficial observations. Dr. Lehman testified that my refusal to undergo an evaluation was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Weber submitted the documentation of our evaluation with Dr. Moore, which completely refuted his conclusions. Then it was our turn. Mr. Weber first called Mr. Green, my pharmacist, who explained how he had been tricked into signing a statement that distorted my medication buying habits. Dr. Moore testified about my excellent mental state and presented the results of the cognitive tests, which had been flawless. Mr. Sommer from the hardware store testified about my mental competence and explained that my decisions to cancel automatic transfers were completely rational and had been processed correctly. Eleanor and my friends from the garden club testified about my clarity, my newfound vitality, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood up with dignity and walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, of wisdom gained through pain, of strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Weber guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story. The $33,400 spent in 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Weber finally asked, why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love. I replied in a clear, loud voice. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me so long to make it. Max's attorney tried to make me appear confused during his cross examination. But I answered every one of his questions with clarity and precision. When he tried to imply that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained to him that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect and not on financial interest. In his closing argument, Max's attorney insisted that I was a victim of external manipulation. Mr. Weber's rebuttal was devastating. Your Honor, what we have seen here is not the case of an incompetent elderly woman, but that of a woman who has finally found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration, because their source of income has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own resources. Judge Miller retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began. It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renate Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights. My heart began to beat faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit, but also my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from the abuse of those who supposedly loved me. When we left the courthouse, I saw Max and Lena talking angrily with their attorney. Lena gave me a look of pure hatred before she walked away. Max looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw something that could have been regret, but it was already too late. That night, Eleanor organized a celebration at my house with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other. Renate, Alfreda told me, today, you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. I could travel. I could love. I could create. I could live without fear. Without guilt, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Max and Lena again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment, and that Lena had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps the adversity would teach them what my generosity never could. The value of honest work and independence. Some nights when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is gone. And in her place, someone has been born who has understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Renate. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. And you? What would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think. And also write me where you heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings, until next time.